Dear Mandela Effect community, you once believed that time was linear until you learned that it is a series of moments just perceived to be linear, like frames in a film subject to editing. With an analogy like that, how can some not weigh in on what reality is?
Because ultimately, we're not the avatars we create. We're not the pictures on the film stock. We are the light that shines through. All else is just smoke and mirrors, distracting, but not truly compelling.
Never mind Ron Howard for saying that we didn't go to the moon. He lives in Hollywood and couldn't help himself. Shame on you, OP. Parallel universes, on the other hand, have been around.
Hi, this is W0TM, also known as Wotum.
He calls himself this because that was his ham radio name. He also says he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission.
Tesla, in his work, to get down to it, said that there is more than the dimension we live in. There are multi-dimensions, and he went on, if you really read in depth, to describe some of those dimensions. And if you really went in depth, you could figure out how to view at least some of those dimensions. He, being braver than me, I think, figured out a way to actually visit, so he said, claimed several of the dimensions, and in those said that there's at least 24 dimensions besides the 4 that we know, which is you have to include time to come up with 4 dimensions, but I consider time to be a dimension. Tesla, in books, in writings that have supposedly been destroyed, you go to the Library of Congress and you look up those numbers, that a number of books, writings that Tesla did, which I have read. I won't tell you how I got to read them, but I did. I read them all, and I have a very good memory. I could almost recite what he wrote. He said, you know, he considers the 7th dimension as being the dimension of God. To Tesla, there was very adamant that it would not be smart to ever merge dimensions. He did say the first and second dimensions are so close that merging those 2 dimensions, which appears to be going on right now, could cause a lot of trouble, but would probably not end the world. Bringing in the 3rd and our 4th dimension, the pure evil, you've read about things coming through Stargate and so forth that you really don't want to see. You don't want to. You don't want them in the world. Bringing in the 3rd and 4th dimension would cause worldwide panic. Probably would be the end of the world. So what CERN, for whatever reason, the people doing CERN are all atheists, and they are apparently having some success merging the 1st and 2nd dimension. Tesla also said that each dimension is more powerful than the dimension below it. So if a merge happens, the higher dimension takes over. Well, that's what's happening right now.
Here's what he has to say about the flat Earth.
UHF TV/radar type frequencies act like a beam of light, like a flashlight. You point it and it goes in one direction. It doesn't bend, loop, anything else. It doesn't bounce around much. Using math and curvature of an about round ball, 24,000 miles around, holding like a radar gun 6 feet off the ground, it should be received, in other words, detected, up to about 20 miles away if the signal is strong enough before the curvature of the Earth, using math, causes the signal to head off into space. A flat Earth and a strong, amplified for test purposes, would cause the signal to be received a long distance away if the Earth was flat. This does not happen. Why not? How come it's not received 500 miles away or whatever? Another question. TV towers are very tall for one reason. The antenna itself is cheap. The tower might be $1 million plus. It is tall to transmit the TV signal a long distance to compensate for the curvature of the Earth. And I add, this is all hypothetical. Please no yelling. I am not taking sides. This is hypothetical. A flat Earth would allow a TV transmitting antenna to be on the end of a 6-foot pole and transmit just as far as if it was on top of a 2,000-foot tower. Why waste $1 million on a 1,000-foot TV transmitting tower? Got me. I'd like to know. I personally built the #2 TV satellite receiver and dish from scrap parts in 1981. I know a lot about satellite TV and satellites in general and so on and so forth. I became one of the satellite TV experts. I've installed many satellite receiver systems, each one of them right down to the dish type ones to large ones. Each one has a dish antenna that must be aimed directly at the satellite transmitting the signal, for instance HBO, so forth. If it's off by even a few degrees, your dish on the ground, either azimuth or height, and all you see and hear is just static. A problem with satellites for two-way internet communications, by the way, is the lag time of the signals going back and forth caused by the distance from the ground to the satellite and the speed of the signal, which happens to be speed of light. So why do satellite dishes pointed skyward have to be pinpointed accurately, exactly, where the data shows the stationary satellite is located? Is this a hoax? And if it's a hoax, instead of is it being broadcast from cell towers? If so, why does direction make any difference at all? You ought to be able to point a dish in any direction you like. Nope, you've got to point it right at a spot in the sky where supposedly satellite dish is located. I've heard the statement, not a single video or picture exists of Earth from space. Well, using search engines, putting in terms like video of Earth from space brings forth not just one, but dozens, maybe hundreds of videos. Add in with stars, and stars begin to appear behind Earth. Add in live, and you pick up a few of them that claim to be live. NASA, who I've asked, tells me we blot out the stars so as not to confuse people who just want to see Earth. In fact, there is one satellite, supposedly, can't remember the name of it, supposedly halfway between Earth and the Moon, permanently pointed at Earth, that gives a continuous speed of the spinning Earth. Sure looks round to me. Are kind of like an egg, you know, not exactly round. Um, in fact, there are some hobbyists that have built their own systems, their own dishes, and so forth, and pointed it at that satellite, and they have their own personal. They feed it into, you know, like a monitor, TV monitor, and they sit there and they watch Earth, and they're picking up that signal and so on and so forth. That gets pretty boring, so I had no interest in, even though I've built satellite systems, I don't have the interest in doing that. Using telescopes, and especially really expensive government telescopes, we can view many thousands of other celestial bodies, from close ones like Jupiter to ones far away as planets in other universes. They appear to all be round, and many of them appear to be spinning. Well, if so, how come Earth is supposedly the only flat planet? Or maybe it's all fake and the whole thing is a gigantic hologram with all the planets, all of the countries and groups and organizations and on and on and on, all involved in it, and it's one big hoax. That's tough to do, but you know, so be it. If so, who controlled it before NASA? Seeing some celestial bodies has gone on for hundreds of years. Telescopes are nothing new. You know, they were used to view other celestial bodies hundreds of years ago, including, you know, the famous guess that turned out to be wrong, that there were canals on the planet Mars, and they actually had water in them, and they could see people, and you know, the guy just, you know, his imagination ran away with them. But by the way, the water effect of seeing objects up to 200 miles away is well known in science. Light can bend when a surface is something like ice, water, even gas. This was discovered hundreds of years ago. The atmosphere can even add a slight bend in the beam of light, radio frequency, etc. This is known and normal. In fact, when computing the radio horizon, you add in a factor of 10% to allow for that slight bending that goes on, which is quite normal. I could go on with another dozen puzzling questions, but I'd first like to see if I receive actual science-based responses or just a bunch of trolls having a good time. I hope to hear from those who are serious and polite. If not, this will be the only video I do on this. As I say, I do not take sides on this. I am more concerned about CERN opening up the gates to Hades, which is what was said in one of the speeches, but is no longer on the internet. Wonder why. The gates to hell, thinking they would be able to manipulate time, going back in time, changing history as they wish. Thus, if you own history, if you own the past, you own and control the world. No, they will instead, they will simply allow in demons, which is already happening. Bad effects are already happening. Some things are just silly, like most of Mandela Effect, Bernstein Bears, and so on and so forth. As I say, there are many looming potential, ELEs, which stands for extinction level events, hanging over our planet. Personally, the shape of Earth has no bearing on whether Earth will be here in 2017 or not.